On November 24, 2009, a 26-year-old boy named John Edward, who lived in Utah, America, took leave directly from his job and reached his home in Utah. And when he reached there and met his family, all the family members together made a plan that why not celebrate this vacation in a good way, and then they made a plan to explore Naughty Patty Cave, and this plan was going to be the most terrifying decision of his life. So, everyone in the family planned to explore Naughty Patty Cave at 8 p.m. on November 24th and return home a few hours later. But what was about to happen there was unimaginable. Although John was going to visit this cave for the first time, he had some caving experience, having gone caving with his younger brother as a child. There's a section in the cave that's quite challenging, called the birth canal, which is so narrow and tight that even experienced cavers can't maneuver their bodies. People's hips and shoulders would get stuck there, and no matter how hard they tried, they wouldn't be able to get free, requiring a rescue team. For this reason, the cave was closed years ago. Naughty Patty Cave reopened only in March 2009, with some new rules. The rules stipulated that a permit had to be obtained from the local authorities 21 days before entering the cave, and each group of cavers was required to have 2 experienced cavers. John and his 13-year-old younger brother, Jose, were both experienced cavers. They received their permits, and then the entire family arrived at the entrance of Naughty Patty Cave. The size of the slide was only 30 inches. They entered the cave at 8 p.m. on November 24th. For the first hour, everything went smoothly, and everyone moved confidently. But then John, Jose, and their 2 friends stopped at the big slide location and, after reviewing a map, decided to visit the cave's most challenging, birth canal, located in the cave's deepest section. It's so tight that only a few people can cross this cave. It's believed that there's a long, tight passage, and if you cross it, there's another long, tight passage at the end. If you cross that, you'll find a small opening at the end where you can turn around and then come back. However, it's so tight that even experienced cavers can feel suffocated and panic. John and his younger brother, Jose, who was following behind, find the birth canal and enter it. The mistake is that the route John and Jose entered wasn't the birth canal at all. They had actually entered the wrong route, which they had no idea existed. John moved 15 feet forward and encountered several rocks. However, John was healthy and could move his body in different orientations. He moved forward, folding his shoulders, waist, and legs in the proper direction. John had now reached the corkscrew route. As John progressed, the passage became tighter, and by then, he couldn't even turn back, as it was actually too tight. He felt he was in the birth canal, and accordingly, he knew there would be a small opening at the end, allowing him to turn. This was where things took a turn, and by then, he had reached the corkscrew area. Crossing this corkscrew area required a caver to be very small and flexible, and only a few people could cross it with their skill. From there, the caver had to make a sharp 90 degrees bend from the rock bottom to the left. By now, John had turned through this small opening, and then he reached the most difficult section. 5 years ago, a 16-year-old boy, Brock Clark, was stuck in this very corkscrew section. He was only 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed 63 kilograms. It took 14 hours to rescue him. John was also at the exact spot. He was 6 feet tall and weighed 90 kilograms. He had no option to turn his body and return. Due to the limited space, he reluctantly squished himself towards the ledge. Even though this area was tight, John thought he was at the narrowest point in the birth canal. This meant that there would be a larger space ahead, where he would have the opportunity to turn. He pressed his stomach against the rock and continued moving forward. He was moving in a downward direction, that is, directly below the ground. John had no idea where he had reached. He hoped he would find an opening ahead, but then he started falling at a high speed. He caught himself with his hands, shouting loudly, "Joss, don't come here. Don't follow me." Quote, he needed to lean on his brother, leaning on his shoulder. To get out, he needed to. Then John saw a glimpse of a hole in his headlamp, and hope arose within him. But this was the biggest and final mistake of John's life. He moved forward and poked his head into the hole. The tunnel he was going into was unknown. Now he was there, and the tunnel was even tighter, the space was much smaller. Just as he had thought, there would be an opening ahead, but the path was blocked. This was the end of the entire cave passage. The space in this place was 18.5 inches wide, meaning he was in a completely upside-down position, about the size of a laptop screen, with his head down, his feet up, and bent at about a 70 degrees angle. He tries to push himself up, but the hole is exhausting. One of his hands is trapped in a useless position, the other bent at his chest. He tries to push himself up using the wall, but quickly realizes that despite all his efforts, he can't move, and his feet are stuck in the narrowest side of the hole. He yells for Jose again, even though Jose is behind him on the corkscrew path. But he doesn't cross the area like his brother. Instead, he extends his legs and then puts his head back so he can easily return from the front. He can hear John's voice continuously, and finally, he reaches the spot where he sees John trapped inside a hole, swallowed completely by the hole, leaving only two of his legs visible. He tries to grab both of John's legs with his own. But John comes up a little, then loses his grip, and John falls back to his starting position. Repeated attempts to do this failed, leaving both frustrated. Joss realized they needed professional rescuers. They decided that Joss would go outside to fetch help, while John would do his best to relax and breathe slowly, as oxygen was severely depleted. Joss emerged from the cave, informed everyone, and a rescue team was called. The biggest problem was that John was now in a side-down position, and the rescue doctor believed he could only survive for 8 hours, before his organs began to fail and he could go into cardiac arrest. A female rescuer named Susie entered first to rescue John. She tied a rope to her feet to prevent her from getting stuck inside. Its height was only 5.3 feet, making it very easy for Sushi to cross the corkscrew area. She met John at 12:30 a.m. John had been stuck there for 9 hours. Then Sushi and John had this conversation. "Hi John, my name is Sushi, how's it going?" "Hi Sushi, thank you for coming," John said, "but I really want to get out." "Oh, no, worry, John, you're going to be out of here." Seeing this professional help, John thought he would get out of here immediately. But he was wrong. Susie realized the situation was worse than it seemed. Susie tied John's legs to a rope and tried to pull. But the friction in the rope was too much, preventing her from pulling effectively. Susie tried everything she could. But she, too, became frustrated after 2 hours and had to leave. Outside, all the rescuers formulate a plan to free John. It's decided to install a pulley system and use a machine to pull him out, as Brock Clark had also been trapped in the corkscrew area 5 years earlier, and he was rescued using a pulley system. It was taking hours to move all the pieces of equipment to the other side of the cork. The tunnel was extremely tight, allowing only small tools to be inserted. Only one person could be on hand to assist at a time, and that person needed to be small and flexible enough to cross safely. It wasn't a simple situation, and the police were trying to keep John relaxed by talking to him. John had been stuck there for 12 hours, spending the entire night in an upside-down position, and the body has its own physical limitations. He had already exceeded his limit to remain in such a position. His 90-kilogram body was struggling against the pressure of gravity. His blood circulation was impaired, and his breathing was gradually stopping. Spending the entire night there was making things aggressive. His legs had stopped working. It was extremely painful for the rescuers and John's family to see John in such a state, but they were also helpless, and the rescuers were exhausted from the drill. The rescuers knew they could get out of there at any time. But this was not in John's destiny. He was struggling and trying to expand his chest so that he could breathe, and the oxygen concentration in the air was also decreasing. And now, after all this time, a wide telecommunications system is installed near John, and from the other side, John's wife, Emily, speaks to him and tries to encourage him. John reassures his wife that he will get out soon and everything will be fine. By now, it's 4 p.m., and John's 18 hours have passed. To move. A rescuer named Ryan enters the cave and approaches John. Ryan says, "How are you, John? It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe it. I'm upside down. My legs are dying." Quote. Ryan sees that the body is stuck in the narrowest side of the opening, so he first straightens it and then ties the legs with a rope and pulls them out. But John's legs are in excruciating pain. Every time he pulled, John would tell him to stop, as his nerves had become ultra-sensitive. They would pause for a moment and then try again. By then, it seemed the police system was working. John was almost high enough to see Ryan, make eye contact, and Ryan would give him an energy drink. 19 hours had passed in this way. Things were moving very slowly, and it was taking a lot of effort. Although they were achieving some success, it was still extremely difficult to free him. John's feet were hitting the ceiling above, and twisting his leg in that passage was impossible. So Ryan finally decided to break his leg. And that's when the unthinkable happened. The entire system had failed. A bolt, drilled into the wall above John, dislodges and hits Ryan directly on the head, knocking him unconscious. John, who had been halfway up, falls back to his original position, unresponsive. This moment was John's final fate. He might never recover. When Ryan regains consciousness, his head is bleeding, completely confused as to what happened. Ryan is taken out and sent to the hospital, and his father, Dave, goes into the cave to retrieve John, and it takes another hour to reinstall the broken police system. Dave tries to tie John's body together with rope. However, no matter how long he stays there, John remains unresponsive. This entire operation would have been impossible without John's help. It was impossible for a 90-kilogram man to get out of the cave without help. While Dave was trying to tie John to a rope, he himself was stuck for 15 minutes, eventually becoming exhausted and having to climb out. Brandon Coles took his place as the new rescuer, and a telecommunications system was installed so his family could communicate with him. But what Brandon could see, Emily couldn't see. John wasn't responding, and it's not known if he could hear them. Until a few hours earlier, John's breathing had been heard, but now that too had gone silent. The rescue team formed a group in an area and decided that John was likely dead. They would send medical professionals into the passage to confirm, and that's exactly what happened. Medical professionals confirmed that John was dead. At 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, it was officially confirmed that John Edward Jones was dead. 120 rescuers tried for 27 consecutive hours to get John out. However, this was impossible due to John's upside-down position. John spent the last 27 hours of his life in an extremely inverted position, even though doctors had predicted he would only live for 10 hours in this condition. This is truly commendable. The rescuers who went inside to get to John were truly heroes. They knowingly went to help in places they themselves did not know about. That's so risky. One rescuer told the media that this was the toughest rescue of his 29-year rescue career, and he was defeated in this rescue. Authorities were trying their best to get John's body out of the cave. But after discussion, it was decided that doing so would be too dangerous for the rescue team. Finally, it was decided that John's body would remain buried there forever and the entrance would be sealed with concrete. A week later, the entire Nutty Paddy cave was permanently sealed.